This conference will now be recorded.
Right. Okay, so we'll understand what exactly this SAP UI5 contains. SAP UI5. Okay, so this UI5 stands for User Interface 5. User Interface 5. So let's see what is the meaning of that file later on. Right. So as part of this SAP UI5, okay, we'll be covering what backend development. Okay, and then after this, we'll be discussing what front-end development, back-end development, and what front-end development. So if you take this back-end development, as part of this, we'll be seeing the development of OData service development, and then as part of this front-end development, we'll be seeing developing what UI5 applications using what UI5 framework, developing UI5 applications using UI5 framework. Okay, so this backend development will require around 25 hours, around 25 hours. So this will be 1 month. Around for the first 1 month, we'll be discussing this backend development. Okay, and then coming to this front end development, this will be around 40 hours. Okay, I can say 35 to 40 hours. Okay, so I can say this is approximately around 45 days to 50 days. So the total duration would be, okay, total duration will be around 2.5 to 3 months, which includes both back-end development and what front-end development. So for this batch, initially we'll be starting with what back-end development, and then after 1 month of back-end development, we'll be discussing what front-end development. Okay, for backend we require around 25 hours, and for front end we require around 35 to 40 hours. Okay, so as part of this front end development, we'll be saying HTML, we'll be saying CSS, and we'll be discussing JavaScript. Okay, so this HTML, CSS, and JavaScript will be initial 10 hours. Okay, this is the prerequisite, and then afterwards we'll be discussing what UI5 library, there is UI5 framework. Okay, right, so this will be around what 25 to 30 hours. That is what UI5 library, right? So total duration will be around 2.5 to 3 months. So it is something like this. So this backend development, it includes what OData service development using what NetWeaver Gateway Service Builder. So all of you are from ABAP background. Okay, so just like we have class builder, function builder, we have something called as NetWeaver Gateway Service Builder. By using the T code SCGW, we will be developing the OData service development. So for getting into this backend, for getting into this OData service development, the prerequisite is we should know basic ABAP. Basic ABAP, when I say basic ABAP, we should know how to work with the internal tables, work areas, the general basic statements, and then we require the knowledge of what object oriented, like what is class, methods, attributes, constructors, inheritance, polymorphism, abstract classes, and what interfaces. So this is the prerequisite for getting into what the backend development. Okay. So as I told you, after discussing this backend, we'll be going toward front-end development. So as part of this front-end development, we'll be seeing the developing web applications using what UI5 framework, following what Fiori guidelines. We'll see what is the difference between UI5 and Fiori. Okay, so as part of this front-end development, we'll be discussing the UI5 framework, the JavaScript and Fiori, and the basics of HTML and CSS. Okay, and front-end development, what is the prerequisite for this? Any programming skills. Any programming skills. So when I say here, who has to go for this back-end development? It's compulsory. ABAP consultant should get into what? This particular what? Back-end development. If you take front-end development, it can be an ABAP consultant or any web developer. Means if you're from Java background, .NET background, or whatever it is, any web developer can get into this particular front end. Okay, so if you're working as a ABAP consultant, your role in the project would be, okay, you'll be working sometimes both as front end developer as well as what back end developer, or sometimes you might be responsible only for what back end development. Okay, but if you are looking for more opportunities, it is always better that we get into what both the developments, back end development as well as what front end development. And most of the people will have a feeling that to get into this UI5, they require Java background. Okay, there is no link between this Java and what UI5. It's absolutely wrong. We don't require any Java background to get into this particular UI5. What we will be doing as part of front end is initial 1 week to 10 days, we will be discussing the JavaScript. JavaScript is different, Java is different. Okay. So even if you don't know JavaScript also, it's absolutely fine because anyhow initial 1 week to 10 days, we'll be discussing the JavaScript. That knowledge would be sufficient to get into this particular UI5 framework. Okay, so as part of this batch is concerned, initially we'll be discussing the backend development, and after 1 month of backend development, we'll get into what front-end development. So for this backend development, what are the softwares we require is this SAP EHP7. EHP7, so we require the SAP server, and for doing this front-end development, we'll be using Eclipse tool and what WebID tool. Okay, so in some projects they may do this front-end development using what Eclipse tool. In some projects we'll be using what WebID tool. So it's always better that we have hands-on experience on both Eclipse tool and what WebID tool. So as part of our what resume is concerned, we have to say that we are good with what both Eclipse as well as what WebID tool. Okay, and coming to the classes, classes will be officially from Monday to Friday. Monday to Friday, and the class timings would be 7:30 a.m. to 8:30 a.m. Sometimes, in worst case, it may extend till what 8:45 a.m. So this is the schedule for the entire UI5. So any questions related to this part, please ask. You can use the chat box or you can unmute and ask the questions. Any questions you can unmute and ask, or you can use the chat box. Yes, Sujit, tell me. Sujit, if you have any questions, yeah. Yeah, we'll be using both the things, Eclipse tool as well as WebID tool. Because as I told you, I cannot say that we'll be using only Eclipse tool in the projects. Okay, some in some project implementation they might be using Eclipse tool, or in some project WebID tool. So as part of our course is concerned, we'll be seeing what both of them. Okay, Eclipse as well as WebID. Some examples we'll be seeing in Eclipse and some examples in what WebID. The purpose is same, but the way we develop is what different. So after completing this course, you can say that you are good in both Eclipse as well as WebID tool. Yeah, we'll see what is this backend and front end, Ravi. Okay, by the end of this session, you'll understand what is backend and what front end. Okay. Any other questions, others? So the first important thing is it is nowhere related to Java. Absolutely wrong. Okay, if you know Java, C++, understanding this would be easy. Okay, understanding this would be easy because this complete UI5 will be what object oriented. Since the C++ and Java are what object oriented programming language, understanding this would be easy, but there is no, it's not mandatory that you should know Java. Okay, that and here our focus is not learning on HTML and CSS. Okay, just we'll be seeing the basics. Only some 2-3 sessions we will spend on what HTML and CSS. Our agenda is not to learn HTML CSS. Our agenda is to learn what UI5 framework. Okay, so more focus would be on UI5 framework and what JavaScript. Okay, now let us understand what is the difference between UI5 and what Fiori. Okay, so most of the people will have confusion that what is UI5 and what is Fiori. My answer is both are same. Both are same. We will be using Eclipse as well as WebID Venkat, not ANA Studio. We will be using Eclipse, the plain Eclipse tool, as well as what WebID tool. ANA Studio is not required. ANA Studio we require if you are working as a ABAP ANA consultant. Okay, so here we are not learning ABAP ANA, we are learning what UI5. So Eclipse and WebID tool will be sufficient. ANA Studio is also what Eclipse based tool only. Understood? ANA Studio is also what Eclipse only. Okay, in that Eclipse tool, okay, we will be installing some ANA related plugins and then we call it as what ANA Studio. But both are what same. ANA Studio is nothing but what Eclipse tool only. If the Eclipse tool is installed with additional plugins related to ANA, we call it as what ANA Studio. Okay. Any other questions? None. Okay. Right. So as I told you initially, we'll be starting with what backend development from tomorrow. Today we'll understand what are the things we are going to discuss in this UI5. Okay. Like what this backend contains and what this frontend contains. So first of all, let us understand what difference between what or what exactly is UI5 or what a field. Okay, so to get into this, most of you are from ABAP background only. We'll be developing what ALV reporting in what ALV reporting in our normal ABAP development. Okay, so how do we develop the ALV reporting using classes? I'm not talking about function models. ALV reporting using what classes? How do we develop? Okay, if you take the ALV reporting using classes, first what we'll do, we'll take one dialog screen, that is, we'll take one module pull screen. On the layout of that particular screen, we'll place what custom control, and then what we'll do, whenever we call a module pull screen, what is the first event triggered? PBO event, process before output. In that PBO event, what we will do, we will link the custom container with what custom control, and then we will link the ALV grid with what custom container. That is the first thing we'll do. First, we'll design the screen with custom control. Then the second step is we will link all these three things. What are they? Custom container will link with custom control, and then the custom container has to be linked with what ALV grid. Okay, so after this, after doing these two steps, the third step is what? We will retrieve the data from what? One or more tables. From whichever data you want to display, we will get the data from those one or two tables. After that, if the data is successfully retrieved, we will generate the field catalog. Okay, how we will generate the field catalog? We will generate it either by using a function model LVC field catalog merge, or we will develop the field catalog using what? Manual process. Okay, using manual process. After generating the field catalog, if required, we'll generate the layout. We'll design the layout settings, like we'll provide the grid title, we'll do what all kind of layout settings. After that, we'll display the data in the ALB grid. How do you display? we'll call some method like set table for what? First display. So what I'm trying to say is, in order to develop this ALV reporting, we are following some guidelines. I'm talking about ALV reporting using classes. Compulsory, we have to follow that particular guidelines. I repeat that guidelines once again. First, we'll create a model pool screen. On top of that model pool screen layout, we will place a custom control. Why we will place the custom control? Because in the runtime, ALV grid will sit on top of a custom control. Since ALV grid cannot recognize custom control on its own, what we will do, we will link the custom container with the custom control, and then the ALV grid with what? Custom container. After that, we will retrieve the data from one or two tables into what? Internal table. If the data is successfully retrieved, we will generate the field catalog, then we'll generate the layout, and then we'll display the data in the ALV grid by using an appropriate method like set table for first display. So we have to follow these guidelines. Okay, so these guidelines are based on what? ABAP programming only. Okay, we will develop the ALU report. Similarly, to develop this particular Fiori applications, okay, what is this Fiori? A Fiori is a new user experience. A Fiori is what? A new user experience. To develop that particular Fiori application, what is the programming language we use? Eclipse. It is something like this. It's already there, I think. Yeah, see here. Okay, so in order to develop this ALV report, we'll develop using what? ABAP programming language. No? ABAP is a programming language we use for developing the ALV report. Similarly, to develop this Fiori application, we use what? SAP UI5. So I can say that SAP UI5 is a programming language. It is a framework we use for developing what? Fiori applications. The finished product, we call it as what? Fiori application. A Fiori application is a new user experience. A new user experience. To develop that Fiori application, there are some guidelines we have to follow. Okay, that guidelines will follow by using what programming language? SAP UI5. So you can assume that for Fiori, the programming language got UI5. So when you say learning UI5, learning Fiori, both are what? Same. Learning Fiori is nothing but we need to know how to develop that particular Fiori applications. That we will do it by using what? UI5. Again, when I say UI5, what is the combination we use as part of that UI5 framework? We'll be having what? HTML, CSS, JavaScript library, UI5 framework library, jQuery, all this. All these things together, we call it as what? UI5 framework. Okay. So the finished product is called as what? Fiori application. Here the finished product is what? ALV report. Here the finished product is what? Fiori application. Any questions on this? Any questions, please ask. Yeah. So now, if you take this UI5,
Sir,
we call it as UI5. Yeah, yeah, tell me.
sir, what is the role of the OData? So ABAP is the language, and UI5 and the JavaScript, CSS, HTML, both are the language. What is the role of the OData here?
Yeah, I'll come to that point, Vishesh. Okay, just give me a couple of minutes and we'll come to that point. Okay. Okay, so let's see what exactly this OData development and this front-end UI5 development series. Just observe here. So as part of this UI5 front-end application, so let me put it like this. So assume that this is your UI5 front-end application. UI5 front-end application. So what exactly a front-end application contains is, it is a collection of what? Views. A collection of what? Views. Again, if you take our ABAP perspective, we will develop the module pool program. A transaction will develop. What is a transaction? A transaction is a collection of what? One or more screens. Understood? So whenever we run the T code, what happens? It will launch the initial screen. In the initial screen, you may enter some input. Then, depending on our action, the next screen will be displayed. So what I can say is, a transaction is a collection of what? Screens. Similarly, a UI5 front-end application is a collection of what? Views. Okay, so it is something like this. What is a view? A view is like similar to what? A screen. It's similar to a module pool screen. A UI5 application may contain what? N number of what? Screens. N number of views. Okay, we should not call it as screens. Here we call it as what? Views. So assume that this is my initial view. Initial view is responsible for what? Showing the content to the user. Whatever the content the user sees, it will be displayed on top of what? View only. So you can visualize this view is similar to what? Screen. Okay. So a transaction, the collection of screens. A UI5 application, the collection of what? One or more views. Okay. So assume that this is my UI5 application. So how do we develop? How do we run this UI5 application? How do you run the T code? How do you run a transaction? We'll run the T code. No? We'll run it using what? T code. Similarly, every UI5 application also will contain what? A URL. It will contain a URL. Since UI5 is nothing but what? UI5 is used for developing what? Web applications. UI5 used for developing web applications compatible with any of the device. I can run that web application either in what? Desktop, either in laptop, or in tablet, or in what? Mobiles. It is device independent. Okay, so the main agenda of UI5 is what? Developing web applications, where the web applications are executed in the browser only. Okay, so every UI5 application will have what? A URL. Okay, that URL we will run it in what? Browser. Okay, so whenever we execute the UI5 application, what happens is one file gets executed. The first file which gets executed is index.html. Just like if you take our ABAP reporting, what is the first event which gets executed? Load of program. The moment you run any ABAP program, internally, what is the first event which gets triggered? Load of program, which is responsible for loading the program into the memory. Similarly, whenever we send the request to the UI5 application from the browser, okay, from the browser, okay, so assume that this is the request. We are sending the request from what? The browser. So whenever I send the request, the first file which gets executed is what? Index.html. Okay, this index.html is responsible for loading the initial view. Okay, what is the initial view in this context? View 1. Okay, so this view 1 will be executed by what? Will be loaded by what? This particular index.what? HTML. Understood? So we are sending the request to the UIF application. The request will execute which file? Index.html. Index.html is responsible for loading the initial view. Okay. So in the view, what we will do? We will show some content to the user. Okay. In that view, the user will perform some action. In the sense, user might press enter key in the input field, or you may click on a button, or you may select or deselect a checkbox, or you may select a radio button. So the user is going to do some action in the view. Depending on the action performed by the user in the view, what happened? The next view will be called. The next view will be loaded. Understood? So like this, we are responsible for what? Designing this view, and we are responsible for what? Navigating from what? One view to what? Another view. When you are navigating from one view to another view, I need to exchange the data. Just like, just to understand, I think it's already there. Let me open that. Yeah. So here, if you take our MM01 transaction, if you take our ABAP SAP perspective, we have create material T code MM01. Can I create the material in one screen? No. Okay, so what we will do? We will run the T code what MM01. It will open with initial screen. A transaction might contain what? N number of what? Screen. So in initial screen, you will provide some data and you'll perform some action. you may click on a button or you may press enter, whatever it is. Okay, so whenever you do that, the second screen will be loaded. In the second screen again we will show what some content. Okay, so we'll capture some data like that. We'll capture the data across what many screens. In the last screen, what we will do, we may click on the save button. Whenever I click on the save button, what should happen? The data should go and sit in what? The database table. Now. What are the material you have created? Depending on the type of data you captured, the data will go and sit in what? Appropriate tables. There are many material related tables, like we have what? Mara table, which stores the general material data. We have MAKT table, material descriptions. If you are capturing the material plan data, it will go and sit in what? MARC table. If you capture the storage location data, it will go and sit in what? MARD table. So like that, depending on the data you capture in the screen, the data will go and sit in what? One or more tables. This is what will happen in our general transactions. Similarly, here what I am trying to do, I am trying to develop a UI5 application. UI5 application is nothing but a collection of what? Views. How do we develop these views? With a combination of what? HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and what? UI5 library. And what we will do in these views, will show some data to the user. From where the data will come? The data will come from what? The backend system. So now this is the role of what? Front-end developer. And let us talk about what? Backend development. Okay, so try to understand. So this is my what? Backend development. Backend development is nothing but what? OData service development. OData service development done. So here the backend system can be, it can be any SAP server. So assume that these are my SAP servers. 1 second. Let me put like this. This might be ECC server. This might be what? CRM server, or this might be SRM server, whatever it is. Okay. So you may have different SAP servers. Assume this is ECC, assume this is CRM, or assume this is what? Something what? SRM server, whatever it is. Okay, all these are what? SAP systems. So in these servers, you'll have some data now. You'll have what? Some data. So what we are going to do is, as part of this backend development, we'll be developing something called as OData service. Okay, so whenever we develop the OData service, a URL will be generated. So assume that this is your OData service. This OData service also will have what? A URL. Will have some URL. So what is the job of this OData service? It is responsible for interacting with this SAP system. So in this context, I am talking about only SAP system. It can be SAP system, or it can be what? Non-SAP systems. Okay, so this OData service is responsible for interacting with the SAP systems. What we will do as part of this interaction, we are responsible for what? Performing what? Crude operations. Crude operations, like we are responsible for creating the data, we are responsible for reading the data, or updating the data, or what? Deleting the data. So all the database operations, we call it as what? Crude operations. We'll do it using what? OData service. So assume that in the project we are responsible for what? UI5 backend developer. UI5 backend developer means what? Nothing but what? OData service development. Okay, so what you will do, as part of the development, we will be developing the OData service. This OData service is responsible for performing the database operations with our SAP systems: create, read, update, and what? Delete. Understood? Done. Now this OData service should be consumed in our what? Front-end application. So assume that your role in the project is only what? UI5 backend developer. So you will develop the OData service. How do you develop? We will discuss that in the next 1 month. Okay, once the OData service is developed, what happens? A URL will be generated. This OData service should be consumed, should be accessed from our front-end application. Okay, who is going to access that? It is going to be consumed by what? The front-end developer. Okay, who is this front-end developer? This front-end developer can be what? It can be a web consultant, or it can be what? Non what? SAP consultant. It can be what? Non-SAP consultant. Whereas this back-end development, this is purely done by what? A web consultant only. Understood? So most of the times you will have a separate team for what back end as well as what front end. But if you want to increase your job opportunities, okay, what you have to do is in your resume you have to project that you are working as what both back end developer as well as what front end developer. Nowadays what happens is companies are looking for a web consultant who can involve in both back end as well as what front end. Earlier initial stages for the first couple of years, 2 3 years, what happened is there used to be a separate team for what back end. When I say back end, they are purely what a web consultant, and separate team for what front end. Again, separate set of a web consultant, or it can be non-SAP consultants. Okay, so if you're working as a back end developer, you will develop the OData service. Whenever you develop the OData service, a URL gets generated, and then what you have to do is you have to prepare the technical specs. In the technical specs, we have to document about your OData service. What is the URL and what is the entities available in that? What is the entity? All those things we'll understand later on. We'll have the entities, we'll have the entity types, and that entity type will have what? Some properties, okay, and you'll have something called as runtime artifacts like data product class, model product class, many things are there. We will not get into those things at this stage. So we'll prepare the technical specs. That technical specs will hand over to what? This particular UI5 front-end developer. What the UI5 front-end developer will do by referring to that particular technical specs, he will start consuming this particular OData service. Okay, so whenever we consume this particular OData service, internally a protocol will be used. OData protocol. OData is basically what? A protocol, open data protocol. So internally, we are not bothered about this. Internally, a protocol will be used which is responsible for consuming what? OData, which is the front end application. So what we will do now, as part of this view, we will exchange the data. Data should flow from what? One view to another view. Just like if you take our ABAP context, data will be flowing from what? One screen to another screen. Okay, similarly here also, the data should be able to access from one view to another view. From where this data is coming? From the backend. Okay, so we'll consume that particular data, we'll display the data to the users in the form of what? Views. Is it clear? Devashish, is it clear what we will do in the back end and what we will do in the front end?
Yes, sir. But sir, I have one question.
Hmm.
Sir, if the data is coming from the SAP HANA, so or any other out of the SAP, so how it is
Mhm.
possible? So what is the role of the OData here?
Yeah, that's what. Here, since we are from a web background, I'm talking about SAP systems only. Okay, understood. It can be SAP system or it can be non-SAP systems. We are not bothered about that. Okay, we are bothered about only how to develop the OData service. OData service. This OData service will either connect to a SAP system or non-SAP system. Understood?
Okay. Okay.
Okay, a URL will be generated. Our job is to give that URL to prepare the technical specs and give the technical specs to the front end developer. That's all. It can be ANA database, it can be ECC, it can be CRM, whatever it is. We are not bothered about what is that system here. Our job is only to develop the OData
OData,
service
sir.
and how do we access. That's all.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
UI5, Abhishek, UI5 is a programming language. UI5 is a framework. Framework means library. What is the library contains? It contains classes, interfaces, methods, properties, all those together we call it as what? Library or what? Framework. UX means what? User experience. I'll come to that point. User experience means, see, user experience means, suppose now suppose we have smartphones. Before the smartphones, we don't have any smartphones concept now. We are still using what mobile phones, but it is not a smartphone. So we have a new user experience now. The look and feel will be different. The way we use it is not different. That is called a good user experience. Rajendra, I didn't get your point. How OData protocol works means we are not bothered about this OData protocol. We cannot see this protocol physically.
Okay, means it will
It will be
connect through
used
URL only or proxy
URL.
something.
Yes, yes,
Yes.
yes. It's just like suppose if you access any website, how do you access the website? You'll open the browser and you will
Browser, yes.
type out yahoo.com or you'll type gmail.com. So
Okay.
internally, what is the protocol used? HTTP protocol. What is a
Okay.
protocol? Basically, it is a set of what some guidelines, set of rules and regulations. Okay, what I'm
Okay.
trying to show here is a protocol will be used internally. What is that protocol? OData protocol. Whenever we consume OData service from the front end applications, what is the protocol used internally is OData protocol. But we cannot see this physically or we cannot control this physically. It is internally used, right?
Okay. Thank you.
So, in the interview point of view, we should be very strong in what? Saying that you worked as both back end as well as front end. So if you are from web background, how you have to project these experiences? Initially, you have to say that you worked as what UI5 backend developer means your job was only to develop the OData service. Later on, what you have to say is you got an opportunity. You got an opportunity to work with what front end team. What you have to say is initially we had a separate team for what front end, but later on during the project, I was involved in developing the front end applications. Yeah, as part of the course, our focus would be more on how to consume, how to develop the OData service connecting to SAP systems. Abhishek. Non-SAP system, again, we require what different setups for that. Okay. When I say non-SAP system, it need not be database only. It can be Excel also. Data is there in the Excel in the file. That Excel file, that Excel data, I should consume it from a UIF application. So there also will develop what OData service referring to what Excel. So that example will show. So Excel is also is what non-SAP system. But here, as part of the course, more focus would be on what? How to get the data from SAP systems. While learning UI5 front-end, which database we are going to use? HANA database, Oracle database, or what it is? Okay. It can be any database, Ravi. Okay. Irrespective of the database, the way we access the front-end application is, it is same. Okay. We need not bother about the database. Yes, Sujit. If you want, what I can do is, yeah, we'll develop one simple CDS view in HANA database. Okay, we'll develop the CDS view in HANA Studio. Okay, I'll show you that. So I'll develop the simple CDS view. I'll expose that CDS view as OData service, and that OData service I'll consume it in the front end application. Yes, I'll show that as part of the course. A very simple example, so that you'll get an idea. Done. So this is the overall roles and responsibilities of what UI for front-end developer or what back-end developer. Okay, so here when you're talking about front-end development, we should know how to design these views. We should know how to navigate between the views. We should know how to exchange the data between the views. We should know how to design these views by using this MVC design pattern, model view controller. So we'll be discussing them as part of our front end development. Okay, but initial 1 month we'll forget about the front end. We'll focus only on the back end. Okay, so once this back end is over, we'll be starting with what front end. Any other questions on this? So what is the difference between Fiori and the UI5? A Fiori is nothing but what? It's a new user experience. It's a new user experience which is developed by using what? UI5 framework. So what is this UI5 means? I think it's already there. Yeah, see here. Just observe here. Evolution of what? SAP user interfaces. So observe here. When initially SAP was released way back in 1970s, we have what? SAP GUI. Still we are using what? SAP GUI. This SAP GUI is not web-based now. It is not web-based. Okay, how do we run this in SAP GUI? Through the T codes. Okay, so later on what SAP has done, they released what? A new user interface called as what? ITS in 1990s, Internet Transaction Service, which is web-based. The difference between GUI and ITS is what? It is web-based. But this ITS, the problem with the ITS is we require an external server called as what? ITS server, Internet Transaction Server. Okay, and the drawback of this is what? It supports only limited SAP transactions. I cannot execute all the transactions in what? ITS server. So it is a kind of failure. Then what happened? SAP has released a new user interface. What is this? BSPs and what? WebDimpros in the late 1990s. In the late 1990s, they released what? BSPs and WebDimpros. So if you know WebDimpro again, what is the advantage of this WebDimpro? It is web-based. We have limited coding and faster development. Okay, beautification. The problem with this WebDimpro is what? Beautification is not possible. In the sense, I cannot give my own font settings. I cannot give my own color settings. All those things. And another problem in WebDimpro is what? Client-side validation not possible. All the processing will be carried out at what? Server side only. Okay, so there will be more load on what server, which will degrade the performance. This is a drawback of our limitations of what? WebDimpro. Then we have what? BSPs. In case of BSPs, beautification is possible because it supports what? HTML. BSP supports what? HTML. But the problem with the BSPs is what? It requires what? Lots of coding for what? Designing purpose. So again, this BSPs and WebDimpros, it's a kind of what? A limited usage. So what happened again in late 2000s, SAP has come up with what? New user experience. New user experience that is called as what? Web UI, which is traditionally what? SAP SRM server. Sorry, SAP CRM server. Okay. So what is this Web UI? They have introduced the features of what? Both BSPs and what? WebDimpro. Understood? In that CRM server, they have introduced the concept of both BSPs and what? WebDimpro, and they came up with a new user interface called as what? Web UI. But again, this has got some drawback. What is the drawback? The developer requires knowledge on what? Both BSP and what? WebDimpro. Okay, the developer should have the knowledge on both BSP and WebDimpro. Apart from that, they require the knowledge of what? BOL and Genil for extracting the data. And what is the other drawback? Customization and extensibility are complex. So again, SAP thought that there are some limitations in this particular web UI. So what they have done, okay, they have released a new user experience called as what? SAP Fiori. So SAP Fiori is a new user experience. When they have released this in late 2013, early 2014. So what is this Fiori here? You can see a Fiori is a new user experience provided by what? SAP. What is a Fiori? A Fiori is not a programming language. A Fiori is a set of what? Guidelines which is compatible with what? Any device. I can run this Fiori application either in desktop or in laptop or tablet or mobile. Assume like this. Suppose assume that this is my Fiori application. This is nothing but a UI application, but the finished product we call it as what? Fiori application. Assume that in my Fiori application, in one of my view, I am showing some data in the form of table. Just like in our module pool, we have table control. In UI5 also, we have a control called as table, which shows the data in the form of what? Rows and what? Columns. So if I run that Fiori application, my what? Desktop or laptop, assume that it is showing me some 10 columns because the width and height of what desktop and laptop is what more, so it may show some 10 columns and 20 rows per screen. Okay, if I run the same application in the tablet width and height is what small compared with the desktop and laptop. What happens is this application, this Fury application will be automatically responsive. Responsive is what? The moment you run the same application in the tablet, it is not possible to show all the 10 columns at a time. Na? So what happens? It may show only 5 columns at a time. If I run the same application in a smartphone, again smartphone width and height is what? Less compared to the tablet. It might show only what? 3 columns. So it is responsive. Responsive means depending on the device we use for accessing the application, it will automatically adjust. It will automatically adjust the look and feel. Okay, that is called what responsive. It is platform independent. It supports what powerful theming and what branding. Efficient and performance. Efficient and performance what? Since this UI5 makes use of this HTML and CSS, it supports what both client side validations as well as what server side validations. Okay, so we'll be sharing the task at the client side. If it is successfully validated only, we'll send it to what server. Means the load will not be much on what server. If you take WebDim Pro, all the processing, all the validations are carried out at what server side only. So it will degrade the performance in case of WebDim Pros. Okay, but in case of Fury, it supports both client side validation as well as what server side validations. Before submitting to the server, at the client side itself, means at the browser level only, I should validate whether the user input is valid or not. If it is successfully validated only, we will submit the data to the server for further processing. Okay, so Fury is nothing but a new user experience. So something like suppose before 5 6 years we don't have any smartphones concept. Okay, so we used to use a normal mobile phone. That is one user experience. So later on we have a smartphone. That is another new user experience. Like that, we will come across with many user interfaces. So since Fury is the fifth user interface, they call it as what SAP UI 5. 5 indicates what? The fifth user interface introduced by what? SAP. So this is the story behind UI 5. Any questions on this? Please ask me. So again, before you ask questions, again most of the people will have a feeling that WebDim Pro is outdated. Now we have UI5. It's absolutely wrong. There is nothing like outdated kind of thing. Okay, what I can say is the new customers, they may not go for WebDim Pro. They'll go for what new user experience. Suppose if you take our what traditional sales order creation, we use a T code what VA01. So for creating a simple sales order, I may need to navigate 10 screens. I may need to capture huge amount of data. But what SAP will do in this Fury, they have reduced the number of screens. Instead of saying it as screens, I'll call it as what views. Okay, and they may reduce the number of fields. So it's a new user experience. New user experience. Okay, the old customers who are running their business from years, they will still use WebDim Pros. Am I clear? They may not be interested to go for what? New user experience because it depends on what? Cost factor, resource factor. Okay, so the new resources, they may not know how to use this Fury applications. Okay, so they will still go for what? WebDim Pros. New developments, yes, they'll go for what? Fury. Depending on the cost of the project, they'll go for what? New what? Technology, which is Fury. But still, there are many customers who are still using what? WebDim Pro applications. I cannot say that WebDim Pro is outdated. Yes, maybe after a couple of years, all the customers may shift their business to Fury. But still, there are many projects who are using what? This WebDim Pro development. Yeah, here instead of grid concept, we have tables here. We have different controls in our front end, just like we have text field, checkbox, radio buttons, table control, custom control, and a module pool. In this UI5 framework also, we'll have what? Many controls. Just to give an idea on this, one second. Let me check. Open here. Yeah, I'll open this something called as UI5 demo kit. Try to understand UI5 demo kit. This is a standard website, we use it for reference. Compulsory, if you are working as a UI5 front-end developer, you must refer to this particular what standard documentation, SAP UI5.ana.ondemand.com. Yes, in our UI5, we'll be using the standard controls as well as we'll be developing our own controls. In our module pool, we don't have provision to develop our own controls. We'll be using only the standard controls which are there in the toolbox. But whereas in case of UI5, okay, we can work with standard controls. We can also develop custom controls. So let me just show you that. Suppose if I go to this API reference, yeah, see here. This is the complete this thing. Suppose I want to design a button, so I should know every control in this UI5 is a class. I repeat, every control in this UI5 is a class. Suppose I am interested to work with what button, so I should know what is the library behind that class, what are the properties in that class, what are the methods in that class. If you take our module pool, what we'll do on the layout, just we'll drag and drop the button, we'll set the properties for the button. But whereas here, let me go to a library called as sap.yum. I'll open what something button. Okay, you must refer to this documentation. Even if you have 10 years of experience on this UI5, without this documentation, we cannot survive as a front-end consultant because you'll have thousands of classes, methods, properties, attributes. Okay, you cannot remember, I cannot remember. Compulsory, we have to refer to this particular library. Suppose I'm trying to open what sap.yum.button. Okay, it is completely object oriented. Every control is what a class. Suppose this is a what button class sap.yum.button. Okay, again, if you take our object oriented concept, what a class can contain. If you take our ABAP context, a class is a collection of what attributes, methods. Again, methods can be normal methods or constructors. You'll have instance methods, static methods, events. Here also you can see we have what properties, nothing but what attributes. So these are all the properties. So I cannot remember each and every property. If you suddenly ask me what is the property we use for this button, I cannot say because we'll have what thousands of classes, thousands of properties. Compulsory, we have to refer to the documentation. We have to understand these properties or methods, understand the type, understand the description, refer to these examples, samples. You'll have sample application. You need to refer to this example. Then you'll understand how to develop this UI application. Suppose here the button class has got many methods. Here, can you remember these methods? No, we can't. You'll have what lakhs of methods and properties. Okay, events. Okay, if you take our ABAP context, if you take a selection screen button, if I click on a button on the selection screen, the event triggered is what? At selection screen. If the same button is there on module pull screen, the event triggered is what? PAI, process after input. Here related to button, you can see you have two events, press event and what tap event. I should understand about the press event. I'll click on this, it will open me. Again, the events might contain parameters. So it contains some parameters. What is the parameter type? Okay, so all this. Make clear? So we must refer to this particular documentation. Suppose I want to know about text field. So I'll say sap.yum.what text. Okay, so if I click on this, again every control is what? Class. Okay, this class is inherited, extends from which class? What is the super class for this? Control. This class is implementing what interfaces? These are all the interfaces. Okay, so compulsory we need to refer to this particular documentation. So Abhishek, for your question, the answer is most of the times, as per my knowledge and experience, we will be working with the standard controls given by what? SAP, but we have the provision to develop our own controls also. We call them as custom controls. M means mobile. See, again, this requires lots of explanation. We have a library called as sap.ui.commons. sap.ui.commons. Okay, commons dot button. It will take some time to load it. I'll just select this checkbox. It is refreshing. It is taking some time. Yeah, see here. Deprecated, just like in our ABAP context, we have absolute. Na? What do you mean by absolute? Currently, they are supported. In the future versions, they may not be supported. So, generally, the recommendation is what? It is recommended not to use absolute methods, absolute function models. Okay. So, here also we have something called as deprecated. Deprecated means currently they are supported. In the future version, they may not be supported. Suppose let me open sap.ui.commons.button. It may take some time. Yeah. So, see here what they are saying here, deprecated as of version what 1.38, replaced by what sap.m.button. So what SAP has given is they have given two sets of libraries, sap.ui.commons and sap.m. Initially when this UI5 was released, we had only what sap.ui.commons, means that library is best suited for developing those UI5 applications which are compatible with desktop and laptop. Now later on what they have done, they have released a new library called as what sap.m. M here indicates what mobile. Mobile. Understood? So I want to develop a UEFI application. If I run that application either in desktop or laptop or tablet or mobile, it should be responsive depending on the device I use. So here M indicates what? Mobile. So what they have done here, they are saying that instead of using sap.ui.commons.button, they are asking us to use what? sap.m.button. Okay, so M indicates what here? Mobile compatible. It is a library related to what? Mobiles. Clear, Abhishek? One second.
This conference will now be recorded.
Yes, Abhishek. sap.m library supports all devices, desktop, laptop, tablet, mobile, whatever it is. Whereas sap.ui.commons, it is much suited for only desktop and what? Laptop. Means I can run that in the mobile also, but the performance is not same. That's the reason the recommendation is always go for sap.m only, not sap.ui.commons. Yes, we can use. So as part of our front end, at the ending stages, we'll develop one application, a simple Fiori application. A Fiori application also will have what URL. That URL I can access from my mobile or desktop. We'll see it in live. We'll see it in live experience. Yes. Yes, there is automatically synced, irrespective of the device I use, it will automatically adjust. That is the advantage of what Fiori. You need not do any code changes. Okay, you need not worry about which device we use. For any kind of device, the coding would be same. It will automatically adjust depending on the device we used. Okay. Yeah, Madhusudan, what is the doubt? You just read that. Yeah, and yeah, one more thing here. As part of this course, you need not take anything during the sessions. Okay, during the sessions, you need not take anything. Everything will send it throughout email only. Okay, so we'll be sending the daily email. Okay, by end of the day, we'll get the email where you'll have the what detailed notes. First of all, everything will be there in the documentation. But what are the examples we see? For that examples, we'll have the detail. I'll send the detailed notes, programs, any pictures, any diagrams, whatever it is. Everything I'll send it throughout email. Everything I'll send it through email on a daily basis. So you need not take anything during the live session. Okay. And FAQs means I am against to FAQs concept. Okay. Whatever we discuss in the course, that itself is not FAQs. What are the points I discuss on a daily basis? Okay, the same thing would be asked in the interviews. You will not have separate FAQs kind of thing. I'm against that FAQs policies. So we don't have any FAQs separately. We'll have a detailed notes program. Be perfect in this part. You can attend any kind of what question. You can answer any kind of question. Okay, and we'll also be sharing the recordings. This recordings now, this is only an additional service. This is only an additional service. You'll have preview access these recordings. You'll have preview access to this particular recordings. Okay, and these recordings will be shared twice a week. Okay, it may not be possible for me, okay, to share the recordings on a daily basis because every recording I need to what convert. That conversion will take around 1.5 or 2 hours. Okay, 1.5 or 2 hours. So I'll share it in twice a week, probably on what Wednesday and what Friday. So on Wednesday, what I'll do, I'll share the recordings of what Monday, Tuesday, and what Wednesday. Again on Friday, I'll share the recording of what Thursday and Friday. If time permits, I'll try to share it on a daily basis. Okay, this recordings you'll have a preview access, and this will be available during the course. So if the course goes for 3 months, okay, it will be available throughout this particular 3 months. So the advantage is if you miss any sessions also, you can refer to that recording during the what course. This is only an additional service which we are doing from our end. But on a daily basis, we will try to send the detailed notes, programs, and what diagrams. Yes, Abhishek. On a daily basis, we'll share the recording of everyday session in the Google Drive. I'll share it. Once I share it in the Google Drive, okay, I'll send a mail to everyone. You can access it. Today's session also will share. Every session which we cover in the live this thing, I'll be sharing it. And during the course, sometimes I might be sharing the recordings of previous batches because batch to batch, I may not be showing the same examples. I may not be showing the same examples, or I feel that this topic is deprecated. Currently, if we are not using it, but I might have covered that topic 2 years back. Just for an additional knowledge, I'll share that particular recording also sometimes. Okay. Yeah, Rambabu, what is the doubt? Is it wizard based or manual written? Yes, coming to UI4 backend, manually you have to write the code. Manually you have to write the ABAP code using what? Object-oriented concepts. Manually you have to write. And coming to this UI5 front end, we will be using two types of tools, Eclipse tool and what? WebID tool. So if you use Eclipse tool, it is completely, we have to write the code manually. We have to write the code manually, both for designing part as well as for our business logic. If you take WebID tool, you have the drag and drop facility for designing part. But again, for writing the code, you have to write it manually. So I can say it's a combination of both. And coming to the server access, yeah, good point. Coming to the server access, we don't provide any server access from our end. Okay, we don't want to take that risk. Okay, we don't provide any server access, but one solution you have is there are many vendors who will give their server on rental access per month. Okay, they'll charge some 1,000 to 1,200 per month, 1,000 to 1,200 per month. So for backend part, since we require what EHP7 configured with network gateway, you can take this EHP7 server access for UEFI backend for 1 month. Okay, for 1 month that is sufficient. Coming to the front end part, you need not take any server access because as part of the course only, I'll be showing how to install Eclipse and WebID. So you can install on your laptop and you can access them. Okay. If you don't want to install, again for front end also you can take what server access. So officially what you have to do is only for backend. Initial 1 month I'll be starting with the backend only. For this backend practice, you have to take that server access on the rental basis. If you want, I'll share that vendor details also. You can contact them, they'll charge some 1,200 per month. Coming to the front end part, you need not take any server access because I'll be showing in live how to install Eclipse or WebID, or I'll share the recording link to that. You can refer to that and you can install in your laptop and you can practice. So you don't require any server access for front end. You require only it for what back end. That is your wish, whether you want to install or not. Sujit, is it clear? Yes, other institutes, yes, they might provide server access, but we don't have that facility and we don't want to take that headache. Our focus is only on providing what quality training. So that's the reason we are not into that server access. Okay. Any other questions? Yeah, Rajendra, gateway service is nothing but OData service only. What are the OData service we develop? That we'll do it by using what? NetWeaver Gateway Service Builder. Yes, we have a T code called as SCGW. Just like your class builder, function builder, we have what? NetWeaver Gateway Service Builder. That is nothing but gateway services. So if you're saying that you are UEFI backend development, nothing but gateway services only. Any other doubts? Okay. So yeah, interactive session only. It's not that at the end of the session I'll ask what if you have any doubts. You can ask me the doubt any time during the live session. Okay, so don't wait till the end because we may forget the doubts. So stop me wherever you have what any queries. Stop me. You can use a chat box or you can unmute and ask. No problem. It will be interactive only. And in fact, I'll ask the questions also in between during the course to make it interactive. I'll ask the questions. Okay, so it's not that we will have the last 10 minutes for interaction. No, nothing like that. Anytime during the live session, you can ask me. No problem. Right? And I don't know whether our people have shared the course contents or not. I'll share the course contents with everyone. So let me open it quickly. 1 second. I don't know whether I'm running on my laptop or not. Let me check it.
Not received any course content.
Hmm.
I have not received any course content.
Acha, okay. I'll open it now. I'll share it by afternoon. Okay. Yeah, this is a course contents. Just to give an idea on this. Yeah. So as I told you earlier, for this batch, we'll start with backend first. We'll start with the backend. So coming to this backend part. So this is your backend. Nothing but what? OData service development using what? Network gateway. These are the things we'll discuss in the backend part. This requires around what? 1 month. Okay, so after 1 month of this backend development, we may have a gap for 1 week or so to start with the front end. Okay, so after that, we'll be getting into what? Front end development. So in the front end development, again, we'll be discussing this. as I told you, we require the knowledge of this HTML, CS, and JavaScript. So for the first 1 week to 10 days, we'll be discussing this prerequisite. That is HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. More focus is on JavaScript. HTML, CSS will spend only one session. Okay, JavaScript onward will focus because UI5 is completely based on JavaScript library. So once this is done, we'll be getting into a UI5 framework where we'll be starting with the basic part, then views concept, data binding. We will discuss different types of models, navigation between the views, data exchange between the views, how to develop the app, how to integrate the front end application with the back end, how to integrate the front end application with the back end. And as I told you, we'll be touching what? Web ID also. Initially, we'll use what? Eclipse. We'll be working with Eclipse. Then during the course, we'll be getting into Web ID and we'll start developing the applications in what? Web ID also. This is our course curriculum. I'll share this contents with everyone. By afternoon, I'll try to share it. Done? Any other questions for today? So daily what you'll get the meeting ID. It's a new meeting ID. You'll get it. So official timing is at 6:30 a.m. Sorry, 7:30 a.m. But sometimes it may get extended. The reason is I'm having one ANA batch at 6:30, not 6:30, 6:15. Sometimes it may get extended. So it may get extended maybe 5-10 minutes. So don't expect the meeting ID at sharp 7:30. Okay, you may get it any time between 7:30 to 7:40 a.m. Okay, anyhow, will not be starting exactly at 7:30. That's why I said till 8:45 you should be flexible. So if I send it by 7:30, we'll wind up at 8:30. Otherwise, we may extend till what? 8:45. So daily you'll get the new meeting ID to your email between 7:30 to 7:40. Yes, Surendra, cross apps is planned in the next week, Surendra. Next week. Next week. Okay, so I'm in a dilemma whether to start at 8:30 or 6:30. Okay, Anna batch is going to complete in another 1 week, so I need to decide whether I'll be starting at 6:30 or 8:30 for that class application. Once it is confirmed, you'll get the mail. Tentative date is next week mid. Okay, we'll communicate accordingly. Any doubts? Others? None? So whatever we discussed today, these notes and diagrams and the recording, whatever it is, I'll try to share it by end of day. You can refer to that. Tomorrow between 7:30 to 7:40, we'll continue and we'll start with the back-end development. We'll directly get into the practical part. Okay. See, I'll not focus much on the theoretical part because theory you can refer it anywhere. So more focus would be on what development only, practical part only. Okay. So we'll be starting with back-end from tomorrow. So if you don't have any questions, I'll wind off for today. We'll continue tomorrow. Channel. So I'm winding off. We'll continue tomorrow between 7:30 to 7:40.